So we were just come from the bottom of this system. So the water that comes out of here will get down to where we were. And so the bottom is where the bottom of the pond has been breached, and Cole's fixed that up. So the other place is to look up here at the top where the water starts to spread out. So it's really critical. You could go and do this sort of work everywhere and have small impacts at big costs. So we're really about doing we're lazy, the least amount of work for the biggest amount of effort. So we're the critical bots. So the bottom of a floodplain is critical. And up here, the top is where the water fans out. And the other reason I'd look at this is it's just so busy. So you've got a little creek coming in there, one behind us and one there. So you've got 3 creeks coming in together, and the creeks are wandering around. So this is a busy bit of the landscape, and it's likely that it'll be a critical place. So behind us, we've got the hills with lots of small creeks coming in out of the hills, different hills. That tributary drainage, all the water's joined up just up there. And then, so that water's come down at high velocity and it's high energy, so it's carrying a sediment load. It's got down on the slope's lower, and it's spread out and its velocity is dropped. So every time you spread water out, the water slows down and it loses energy and it drops its sediment load. So this is an alluvial plain going down all down here. Originally, it wouldn't have these creeks, and most of the small creeks in Australia are not natural. So the water would have fanned out and we'd have a broad floodplain going down here. Then something's happened at some time, way back in the past maybe, it's got overgrazed, bared off, you had rain come down and it's cut these channels. So to rehydrate the landscape and restore the natural function of this landscape, what we want to do is restore this floodplain. And so that the water's flowing over here as a broad sheet. And so we tend to look at bends. So if we put a little step, what do you call them? You call them, Cole? I call them a little step, you call them a block, just over there. That'll lift the water, and that water will pond back up here. And if we get that height right, we'll just get to that level, and all of a sudden it's higher than that floodplain. So all the water coming down here will pond up and it will spill out and start flowing down there. We've restored the floodplain. And then down that creek we'd put in more, because it will then flow back in sideways, and they'd put in little ponds and check banks is what Cole calls them, all the way down there to raise the water, so the water in the creek is raised up to the floodplain. And we will then get what this originally had as a broad flow path down there. So the reason for that is that ponds back up here and spills over here. And there's all these little bends up there, and I tend to think like water. Now, where would I go? Well, I'll take the easy way down there. And if I've got to stop, where will they spill out? So you're thinking about where's the pond going to go back so it can overflow back into the floodplain, restore the floodplain. This one you'd do with a bobcat. If you had some rocks, you'd do little Leaky Weirs. So you do a whole series of these small ones back up this system. There's an interesting little creek runs off over the road. We might have a look too, how you get water over a road. So in terms of where we are right here. Yeah, so we're right here. So what I've marked in, the red spots is where we'd put some sort of check bank in. These are the critical spots, and a pond from that one will go back to that one, pond from that one, all the way up. So we create all these little ponds down there, and we recreate that floodplain. Generally, when you look at Google Earth, you get the current latest one, but you might get half a dozen historical images. And when you get those, you'll almost certainly jag one that'll be late in the growing season, when things are drying off. But where the water's flowed, where it's greenest, is where the water flows in the floodplains. Unfortunately, there were only 2 images from here, and they're all it's too much buffle, Craig. And so I can't pick up the patterns, but almost certainly that bend there. So why there's a bend is there's a bit of a ridge coming out there, and the water's hit that ridge and said, bugger it, I've got to go sideways until I find a low point. It's come over the ridge, there's another little ridge in front of it, it's come back the other way. The water somewhere in there will spill out. I just can't pick up the channel in this image and go out that way. So we've split it, spread it, And we drove past it. We could actually see on the ground, oh yeah, that's where it spills out. This water comes down and gets to here, and then you get a fan. So it's got level again, and the water's fanned. There's a little one going that way and that way. So this is not, that's what was like what we saw, water draining in. This is the fan, water draining out. So that's a critical spot. We check it there, and we build it so that water will flow there and there. This, the eroded creek stops about there, and it's flat enough, it all fans out. But you can't see it, but we can see where the water flows down. If we hadn't have checked that one, that would have cut all the way back up to this one. And then we've got a drain going the whole way through that floodplain. And that really is dehydrated. So we've got in early enough to stop that. If we get this going back here and that one, then we stop that and they won't join up, and we can fill this thing all the way back up, and the water will spread out, actually spread out from there. And we've got a big floodplain, something like that. That's the idea. Yeah, so you really can, looking at from above, if you know the patterns. Why does it do that big loop? When you see a loop like that, because there used to be a raised bit of land going through there. And just, so if we fill that one in, it'll backflow it. So that's the analysis we do and figure out where to put it. And I do all this with Google Earth, and then I'll get out in the field with the experts and say, oh yeah, that's about right. So this approach works. So then the next decision out here on the ground is, okay, exactly what sort of structure do we put in each site? You can't tell the detail from this. And you get out and you walk around and you argue a bit, don't you, Cole? As to, yeah, we're going to put one here. Will it be a level one? Will it be a Leaky Weir or Jvane? There's a whole pile of different designs that we use, and different people do it slightly different designs, but all the same, achieve the same job. So exactly like those bigger check banks down there. So so it's raised up. You check what's actually would be here, would be higher, and the low side is there, so it spills that way. Banks back, spills that way onto the floodplain. Some spills around here, back into the channel, and on that shrub on the corner, we'd build another one, so that would pond back to here.
So where are you getting your material to put your bank here?
So I'm happy. So we'd do two types, an earth one or a Leaky Weir.
So if we've only got that dozer and no rocks, and nothing to move rocks with, like if we're just using
so if you haven't got, you could cart rocks in, but we're lazy. If the rocks are there, we'll use them. If they're not, we won't. So this one would probably be dirt, and the Bobcat would be ideal for this one. Just push it back, build that little bank up like Cole does with his big gear, but on a much smaller scale. Yeah.
So you just talking about using the loose creek sediment?
Yeah. Yeah, it's sand. I didn't show it, but we've built this in a creek that's pure white beach sand. And we built these things all the way down it, and we had a big rain just after we'd built it, and there was nothing to stabilise it. If we get the design right, they didn't shift. Beach sand, because we had the pattern right that created the white water flows. And as we saw those eddies in the right spot, and we might put the odd rock in just to change the flow of the water as it's coming out and create the little eddy behind it. And then you've got water pushing back on water, and a sandbank will hold. So you don't have to make them big, you just got to design them right. It's a bit of water whispering, and water will do all the work. Yep. So it's just a mini scale. I don't know, we haven't got it done today, but we might walk up and just talk about where we would put things and why. So the first one, that little shrub on the corner, you'd put one in there, that'll pond water up. And that little creek coming down, so the water in that little creek is combining with this, and there'll be a bit of still water because of the water pond behind the bank. If you build it right, there'll be a little slow moving circle of water right up against that corner. That'll de-energise that water flowing in this water, and this one we designed so it flows out this way. We might, if we got really keen, we might go and put a few rocks or, dead branches in that little creek just to slow it down at regular intervals. So where it's steeper, we'd more likely to use leaky weirs on very steep slopes because the water coming down, you partly de-energise it and it'll work its way through. If you've got a solid one, there's a lot of water coming down at high speed, there's a chance you'll blow it out. On steep slopes, you're more likely to blow out earth ones and less likely to blow out leaky ones. Yep. Okay, so yeah, so we might just walk up and so that bank there will backwater up, it'll fill over here, another one, it'll fill over there. We'd do one up that bend and we'd start flowing water out of there. So all the water's flowing out in broad sheets across here. It's a critical point. So the bank there will pond back up here and then water will flow over that. But so there's a little creek coming in here that's crossing a road. A fire break, is it? Okay, we wondered why it was there. So on the bends down here, on the corners, you can chuck a few rocks in. This doesn't have to be too complex. You might not notice, but where we came out of where we were back onto the track, where that little gutter hit the road, there was no erosion on that road because the road was exactly the level of the bottom of that flowing creek. So the water flowed over that creek without seeing it. So if you're going to raise that back up, your water coming in is going to rise up, flow over there, then fall down here. And so because it's falling, you'll get erosion cut back through and take that out again. One way to stop that is put a little pond in here so that water ponds back to the level of the road. So the water flows over, fills up this pond, it ponds back to the level of the road, and then effectively the water will flow over the road, same as over there, like it doesn't see it. So there's no fall in the flowing water coming off it. It's level, whatever the level of that road is up here, you build one up that way. So it's a level pond and that will never move. And then falls over here. And the way, if you do have to have big falls, if you put one there, put one about here, it falls over, hits the plunge pool, it'll do that circle at the bottom if it's deep enough. The bottom's really stable and then it flows out over the second one. So you need the second one to pond back there. If you look in creeks, you'll see a rock bar or a natural step. The water will flow over and then it's scoured out a pool and then it drops sand just down. It's a riffle.
Why doesn't it just scour around that rock?
So how you place the rocks is really...
Yeah.
We had some rocks.
Yeah.
I see, it'd be easy to explain. So if you... The different designs is Jvane, but the simple one is a horseshoe. One rock there, one rock there, one rock there, and the same, rock going up and that. So you've got a horseshoe shape with a rock in the middle of the lowest. All right, and what happens when the water's flowing high, it falls over that one, and then water falls in, and it circulates there. So it's a stable design, a horseshoe with the bottom rising. And you'll get a little plunge pool there, yeah. And you can do it with dirt, you can build them with dirt in that design, or you can build them with rocks, yeah. And I built a little Jvane up there. Is it legal to move rocks in New South Wales? Oh, sorry, Northern Territory. Right, so over the creek and it splits, I'd put something here, probably again rocks because they're around, little pool back to where the two creeks meet. Okay, so the water's coming down our fire break, so it flows down and you've got a level sill and it spills into here. Water would fall into here, so we want a pool here. So this is a Jvane. So in this case, we don't continue it all the way out because there's water coming in. It's a J, not a very good J. Lowest, biggest. And so water will slow down and spread out and go over that bit. If I had another rock, I'd probably put just another rock there to stop anything happening there. So with that design, when the water spills over, the biggest water is coming over here, over there it's less, and you'll get a little whirlpool right in there, if you got it right. So that little water circulating is a water buffer for the wall that's currently eroding. We should have built one with the water, but there's some simple designs and some literature, and we might see if we can find some, send it out. You can see these designs and how they work. Yeah. So if we look at this creek system, the critical bits is high velocity runoff from the steep hills, and you're not going to do the work up there. You're going to try and keep fire out so your shrubs grow on those creek lines and clog it up. So if you're flying over, you will see some creek lines clogged up in the hills with acacias, and that slows the water down. Where there's no acacias is where you'll get the erosion. So your management there is actually fire management. Let Mother Nature fix it up. Here, this is just a little example of, so this is a little bit of a priority. We want to fix that crossing there. We can slow the water down up here. Well, we spill the water here rather than get it flowing to there, and then slow it before it comes back over. So this is a priority that you just see because there's a track you want to maintain. Yeah, it's all about water. You know, your neighbours might love your water, but give them as little as possible.
You'll love it more than they do.
Yeah, keep the water on your place as long as possible. So that example I put up at Rod's place, literally an inch of rain on his farm for a day to an inch of rain on his farm for 100 days. That's, if you're a farmer, that's what it's all about. And the other bit, we talked a bit about nutrients and fertility. So your big nutrients are phosphorus, nitrogen, potassium and sulphur. Nitrogen, sulphur and phosphorus are soluble. So if the water runs out, so it's carried with the water. Right, so the water runs out of those hills and just goes over to the neighbours. He gets it, you don't. Phosphorus is probably the other really big nutrient, particularly for livestock. It does attach to soil, and the way it'll leave your farm is attached to sediments that flow off your farm, your property. So if the water comes off your place clean and all your sediments that come out of the hills, because they will, drop out here, you've kept all your phosphorus fertility. Don't give it to the neighbour. He can keep his own. Yeah. So yeah, it is about water. Yeah, it's about rehydrating. It's just that erosion has pulled the plug and dehydrated the landscape, and we can put the plug back in. And this approach can be really targeted. You know, you'll have little things like this all over the place, but there's only a few critical spots you need to get right to plug up your system. Then you need to get your fire right in a couple of critical spots, those hills and your creek lines full of timber. Prioritise that in your management. And then your grazing, don't try and flog the shit out of it. Well, no, grazing's a good one because we all know that what grazing damage, the damage that can be done by grazing. We all know it. There are some farmers and producers actually use livestock as their main regeneration tool. Right, so grazing's caused the problem, and grazing be one of your biggest tools to cure it. And it's about when it's grazed and when it's not. So it's about intensive grazing at the right time. So on the De Grey River, it needs to be really hard grazed before the fire season hits now to take all the fuel load out. That's what's saving that river. So that's the only tool as catalyst to save that river, and it's happened. And then that needs a bit of a rest when it's regrowing and shooting back. So it's about where... So I would prioritise from a landscape function, where are the critical areas and what is the right grazing solution for those areas, and get that right, prioritise that. Sometimes you might say it's such an important bit, I'll fence it off with a gate so that I'm going to load it up with cattle when I need to, and I can spell it when I need to maintain the function of that critical bit. On the flats and that, you know, where the water is naturally not going to flow fast, then the grazing doesn't have the same sort of impact. So manage the critical tools up here are grazing. Was this to plug it up, then it's grazing and fire, but prioritise it. So if all your flat country burns, well, it doesn't stuff up the system. But critical bits burn, it does. So it's then figuring out, how does my landscape function? Which are my critical bits that I've got to get right? You don't have to fix everything, you just got to fix the really important bits. And being, you know, pastoralists, you've got hundreds of thousands of acres you might have to manage. You just can't manage all of it, just manage the bits that really matter. Yeah. And find out what the bits are that do matter.